This video is sponsored by Wren. Disclaimer, this work does not glorify the use of drugs, and all discussion of their effects are purely for educational and humorous purposes. As such, it should be eligible for monetization. Please, YouTube, I need this.
Step forward,
said the Jaguar God, speaking not through its mouth, but implanting the sentence directly in my mind. And as I moved linearly forward in this four-dimensional space, the Jaguar became a rotating hypercube, folding and turning itself inside out in a way that beckoned me closer. An infinitesimally tiny space suddenly expanded to cover all of existence, breaking me free from my body and collapsing the spaces between all things, as if all that exists is really a continuous, unbroken line, drawing people, animals, objects, molecules, and for a brief moment of time, that line was pulled tight like a string. I understood then that we are all one, that the image we have of ourselves as separate individuals is only an illusion. If the thing that we call love just means extending our self-regard past the arbitrary boundaries of our own bodies into that of our partners, friends, and family, then in that moment, I felt the purest, fullest love a human being can possibly feel. And I've been lucky that I've been able to take the message of the Jaguar God with me and practice it in my everyday life. It's helped me understand what's really important. That we need to protect our nation's borders with every tool in our arsenal. And while we're at it, we need to get every illegal alien the hell out of our damn country as soon as humanly possible.
Oh hi, didn't see you there. I was just recording sponsored content for Wren. Take it away, B-roll footage. Are you racked with anxiety about climate change? You are correct. Climate catastrophe is approaching fast and also already here. But let's not be doomers about it, because aside from denying climate change exists, there's nothing more useless than living in the global north and saying, there's no point, let's all just die. To actually solve the problem, we're unavoidably going to need the wealthiest among us to change their ways. At the same time, we should also acknowledge how our lifestyles collectively contribute to excess carbon emissions themselves and look to prevent or reduce harm wherever possible. Wren is a company that helps do both. It gives you perspective on your emissions, comparing them to the average in your country and the world. Look, I'm below average in Canada, but horrible on a global scale. Very cool to live in the imperial core. Then, Wren helps you contribute to environmental projects. Here's one that I like, California Biochar. Contributions from Wren users are put towards removing flammable dead wood from Californian old-growth forests, preventing wildfires. Instead of burning these ancient trees, which releases the CO2 inside into the atmosphere, the wood is heated up and turned into biochar, retaining the carbon for thousands of years. This biochar can be mixed with compost and used by local farmers as fertilizer. I also like that, according to my understanding of the process, it's sort of like vaping the forest, which is cool. There are plenty of other options for causes, like helping indigenous groups in Peru prevent deforestation, planting trees in East Africa, or providing clean cook stoves to refugees in Uganda. You get to pick the projects that speak to you, and you receive monthly updates on them. Offset your carbon footprint on Wren. The first 100 people who sign up using the link in the description will have 10 extra trees planted in their name. All right, that's the sponsored content. Let's get on with the video.
The human brain is an astonishingly complex meat computer, capable of imagining unimaginable things. One thing it's not able to do very well is to understand itself. Our minds and how they work are places of mystery, like the deep oceans, or outer space, or a third example that's also vast and difficult to understand. Psychedelic drugs like LSD, magic mushrooms, or DMT interact with the little understood human mind in little understood ways. While they've had a bit of a resurgence in popularity in recent years, these drugs have spent a long time being illegal in much of the world, stigmatized and propagandized about, while actual scientific research has been stifled. But that seems to be changing. Mushrooms have recently been decriminalized in a few US states, and research on the medical therapeutic use of these chemicals has returned. Believe it or not, a major cause of the psychedelic renaissance can be traced back to the best-selling book, How to Change Your Mind by Michael Pollan. This ain't your nephew's guide to mushrooms with the black light cover. This is a serious book for adults about psychedelic drugs. It comprises a scientific, journalistic, balanced view of the drugs and their effects. I read it, and I thought it was pretty good. It seems a bit strange to me to consider Michael Pollan an expert in psychedelics, since he hadn't done any psychedelic drugs himself until well into his 50s, and he'd only done them a handful of times by the time the book was published. If doing drugs 5 times makes you an expert, the guy who got kicked out of my high school prom for yelling at the disco ball must be a genius of the field. But maybe we need a Michael Pollan sometimes. The thing is, for a long time, most of the information you'd find about psychedelics was just deeply felt, confidently related theories from weirdos whose most notable qualifications were just that they'd done a lot of drugs. You want some examples? Okay, sure. There's the idea that the hallucinogen DMT is produced by the pineal gland of the human brain, known to ancient peoples as our literal third eye. When we die, the brain releases DMT and we trip out a little bit, which is why, when people relate their near-death experiences, it kind of sounds like a DMT trip. Though you may have heard this theory spoken in the tones of confirmed scientific fact, there is almost nothing proven about it. The brain does produce the DMT chemical, as do many parts of our bodies, as do many plants and frogs and, I don't know, maybe all living things. But there's no evidence of it happening specifically in the pineal gland. When rats have had their pineal gland removed, the brain still produces DMT. The thing about being released when you die, well, there's absolutely no evidence for that part, other than that it would be cool as hell if it was true, wouldn't it, dude? Another example of this is the stoned ape hypothesis, conceived of by the late Terence McKenna, a psychedelic pioneer and, I would say, pretty cool guy. McKenna posited that before human beings evolved, ancient apes may have coexisted with some kind of a herd animal that pooped. From that poop, it's possible that psychoactive mushrooms grew, and these apes ate the mushrooms and gained knowledge necessary to reach the next stage of evolution. Involving psychedelic drugs, apes, and grand assumptions about human existence, this kind of theory is basically catnip for Joe Rogan types, but as you may have guessed, there is no evidence to believe it's true. Not really possible to prove or disprove, and I'm pretty sure it's definitely not how evolution works. Even Terence McKenna wasn't convinced by his own logic here, but that hasn't stopped the theory from being promoted uncritically in Netflix documentaries, popular podcasts, and dorm room philosophy sessions. There's also what's called the mushrooms theory of inception, which states that if you weren't on mushrooms when you went to see the Christopher Nolan movie Inception, then you really didn't get the movie. This theory was first proposed by my friend Donnell, who went and watched Inception the week after I did. Now, while I saw it completely sober, Donnell watched it on 4 grams of magic mushrooms, an amount which is a lot. He told me that having watched the film in this heightened state of awareness, he'd been able to glean important information that would be simply undetectable to a non-tripping viewer. He pointed out that, bro, you know that lady that kept fucking with him the whole time? Well, he had a sort of epiphany near the end of the movie that revealed that this lady was actually Leonardo DiCaprio's character's wife. Now, disappointingly, I had also figured that out long before the end of the movie, and not through a mushrooms-induced vision, but through more traditional means of establishing character, like flashback scenes or clearly stated film dialogue. It's possible there was something I was missing, though. I'm still not sure. For me, this type of thing really separates psychedelics from other classes of drugs. Theories like these are irresistible for users of psychedelics. You never hear a cigarette smoker going, "Damn, that shit's good. I bet you get that head rush right before you die." Nobody takes a sip of their Mike's Hard Lemonade and goes, "Man, I bet this stuff literally started human civilization." Nobody on coke goes, Actually, okay, cokeheads kind of do this kind of thing too, so never mind. The effects of psychedelics are profound and can often lead to a sense of certainty about thoughts and epiphanies experienced while on them. But this video isn't about any of those unproven theories. It's about another unproven theory / talking point / comforting idea that has been going around basically since the psychedelic 60s. And I'm not sure how common this idea is among people who aren't immersed in psychedelic culture, but it's something I've heard different versions of about 1 million times. That these drugs will make you more progressive, more liberal, more left-leaning. That if everyone could just take these drugs, but especially world leaders, every geopolitical issue would be solved instantly.
So I believe there's a real connection to be made between how we can use psychedelics to improve our politics.
And it stands to reason, doesn't it, that cultures that use plant medicines in order to maintain and create a connection with the sacred are healthier than cultures like ours.
Like the proliferation of nuclear weapons, the way that we're destroying the rainforests. And that is the short-term pursuit of immediate profits, which the alert problem-solving state of consciousness feels is okay. If we embraced other states of consciousness, we would be having second thoughts about all of that. So I think that it, as a particular antidote to the psychological sickness of the modern world, psychedelics have a huge role to play.
Without any doubt, I can tell you the following. If everybody on this planet would be blissed out all the time, then would we need morality? Then would we need to be scared of one another? Then would we need to be greedy of one another because he has this and I don't have that, and we should take it by force or we should take it in some fancy way? Then this world would be a more loving, peaceful, nice place for us to be.
I think what we all need to do, and what white people need to do, is to actually actively take medicines to break the system. Take medicines to reject the title called whiteness.
And that's precisely why politicians should be taking psychedelics.
So, do psychedelics make everyone who takes them into a leftist? Well, no. Sorry, I really could have teased this out a little bit more, but let me just get this out of the way. 100% absolutely not. Let's go through a winding trail of examples of people who psychedelics failed to save from having horrible right-wing politics. Let's start with an obvious example. The Manson family, an LSD-fueled racist hippie cult that attempted to kickstart a race war by committing gruesome, violent acts on innocent civilians and unsuccessfully framing these acts on black people. The leader of the Manson family, Charles Manson, is idolized along with Hitler by current-day violent neo-Nazi organization Atomwaffen. Andrew Thomasberg, a member of Atomwaffen, who was arrested after stockpiling guns and LSD, had texts between a fellow Nazi and himself revealed to the court. One read, "Psychedelic Nazis, there's nothing more Aryan than entheogenic drug use." And speaking of Nazis, QAnon, a violent fascist right-wing big tent conspiracy cult with Nazi roots, is, despite those last 11 words describing the least chill group of people imaginable, full of psychedelic types. There's Champ Parinya, the Thai graphic designer who made the infamously complex Q map, is also big into psychedelics, but you probably guessed that if you've spent more than 2 seconds looking at the thing. Am I reading a post on 8kun or watching the projector at a rave? It looks like the classic red string bulletin board mess you'd find on a conspiracy theorist's wall, but lovingly transferred into Adobe Illustrator. It's wild to think about how many people got red-pilled into QAnon through this. And hey, the red pill, remember when that was just a cool Matrix reference and not an annoying in-joke for pickup artists, incels, Pepe avatars, billionaires, and pickup artist, incel, Pepe avatar billionaires? Well, that phrase was ruined by a guy named Curtis Yarvin, whose blog Unqualified Reservations was the first place to associate taking the red pill with awakening to fascist ideology. On this blog, Curtis, who went by the pseudonym Mencius Moldbug, directly compared taking the metaphorical red pill to a powerful DMT trip, in a way that makes clear his status as a seasoned psychonaut. Also, did you know the guy who coined the term psychonaut was an actual Nazi? A psycho-Nazi, if you will. Ernst Jünger, prominent member of the anti-democratic group German Conservative Revolution, which helped the Nazis come to power, and member of the Nazi Party all the way up until 1938. Dude was like, violent anti-Semitic rhetoric? Sign me up. Night of long knives? Seems reasonable. Night of broken glass? Okay. Wow. I swear, I thought that guy was kidding before. I might have to distance myself from these ideas a bit now, just in case there's a war crimes tribunal later. Anyway, Ernst happened to be big into drugs and wrote extensively about his experiences with ether, cocaine, and hashish. Impressed by his drug writing, Albert Hofmann, the inventor of LSD, decided to reach out and offer Ernst the privilege of being one of the first people on Earth to try the new psychedelic. The two became acid-dropping buddies and close friends. I like to imagine Hofmann losing it on Jünger like, for the last time, Wagner is not good trip music. Hofmann actually dedicated an entire chapter of his book LSD My Problem Child to Jünger. Oh, did you think Joe Rogan was the first psychedelic icon to pal around with problematic people? He was not. I could go on, but you get the idea. It seems like taking psychedelics did not instantly turn these people into peace-loving liberal hippies, but does that necessarily mean that these chemicals don't have an inherent left-wing ideology? Maybe all these people just didn't understand their trips correctly. Does the right misinterpret drugs just like they misinterpreted Squid Game? Actually, I think it is pretty clear that mescaline has an anti-communist, pro-capitalist message. I know it sounds ridiculous to say a chemical could have an ideology, and to be fair, that's not exactly what most people are saying. The popular idea I'd like to speak about more is that psychedelics tend to have a calming, peaceful effect on people, making them generally more connected to nature, more empathetic, conscientious, open-minded, liberal, less prone to authoritarianism, less driven by their ego, and would typically have the overall effect of moving someone away from an individualist framework, perhaps even causing them to embrace collectivist ideals, dare I say, communism? Now, I know what everybody's saying. Jill Goblin, I'm a good little baby who's never been offered these drugs, and even if I was offered, I'd say no. I don't need drugs to have a mind-altering experience that causes me to reframe my perception of reality. But what even are the effects of psychedelics? How are they different from other drugs? Can you explain? I'm talking to the screen right now because I believe you can hear me. I need serious help making my way in the world. Well, sure. Now, obviously, I've never done illegal drugs or committed a crime of any type either. Stay strong, Goblin Gang. But I'll do my best. Psychedelic drugs are a category of substances which have a particular effect on the brain. The three most popular, at least in a global north, non-indigenous context, are probably LSD, psilocybin, or magic mushrooms, and DMT. Psilocybin mushrooms were stolen from indigenous Mexicans by a rich white couple named the Wassons in 1955. The term magic mushrooms was coined in the headline to an article in Life magazine they wrote about the experience. DMT, the strongest of the three, is a naturally occurring chemical found in many plants and animals, including you. Yes, you! YouTube Analytics tells me almost all my viewers are human beings, and those who aren't are mostly Colorado river toads. Now, the hallucinogenic effects of DMT, which had been known to pre-Columbian South Americans for hundreds of years, were first understood in a European context by Hungarian chemist Stephen Sara in 1956. Finally, there's LSD, which was first synthesized by Swiss chemist and aforementioned Nazi friend Albert Hofmann in 1938. Nice job, white people, you didn't have to steal this one. So, how do these chemicals actually affect the brain? Well, one cool way to visualize their effects can be found in a 2014 paper titled Homological Scaffolds of Brain Functional Networks. Okay, I think I said that right. Through a technique called magnetoencephalography, I only needed one take to say that right, researchers were able to map the electrical activity in people's brains. A normal, non-tripping person's brain looks like this. Okay, some lines, definitely some lines, but not too many. Now let's look at a person's brain who's off their tits on magic mushrooms. Yowza! Now that's what I call a lot of lines. The scientists noticed that certain important neural networks that the brain relies on most of the time would actually fall away, and a ton of connections that would often be ignored were lit right up. When we're born, our brains have a ton of connections, some of which become useful to us and get reinforced, while others fall away from not being used. But mushrooms and other psychedelics actually reopen connections our brains have forgotten. This could be why people in psychedelics are more open to new ideas, think in ways that they normally don't. And it could even explain why some people experience synesthesia, where they can see sounds or smell colors or something. Now here's my favorite quote from Michael Pollan's How to Change Your Mind, from a discussion Pollan has with Alison Gopnik, a developmental psychologist and philosopher studying psychedelics.
Gopnik told me she's been struck by the similarities between the phenomenology of the LSD experience and her understanding of the consciousness of children. Hotter searches, diffused attention, more mental noise or entropy, magical thinking, and little sense of a self that is continuous over time. The short summary is babies and children are basically tripping all the time.
That's right. Think of toddlers as just being in the middle of a several-year-long psychedelic bender. Yeah, man, I've just been traveling the country in my hand-painted little Tykes car, showing up wherever there's a Wiggles concert. You know, I don't even come to hear hot potato or lollipop person. What really makes it worth it is just listening to the Wiggles jam. I'm telling you, they really wail, brah. Okay, that's my impression of a baby on acid. I don't think I'll be bringing that one back. So if these drugs do give you a baby brain, it would make sense that they kind of do actually open your mind. So how do you make sure only the good ideas fall into that gaping brain hole? Well, it's not easy. Psychedelic trips are extremely influenced by whatever you expect to happen going in. Prepared for a spiritual awakening, looking for the chance to speak to the creator of the universe? Take enough mushrooms, you'll get it. Anxious that you'll fall into a waking nightmare? Yeah, that could definitely happen too. Psychedelics function a lot like a placebo, but if that placebo was on non-placebo steroids. Here's an example. Mushrooms were discovered in the most Christopher Columbus sense of the word by an odd investment banker for J.P. Morgan and Associates named R. Gordon Wasson and his weird wife, who were funded by the CIA's MK Ultra program to travel to Mexico, where they convinced an indigenous curandera named Maria Sabina in Mexico to allow them to participate in a Mazatec mushroom ritual. For Maria and the Mazatecs, this ceremony was typically either a healing ritual offered to the sick or was for divination purposes, finding lost people and objects. The Wassons, meanwhile, went in with a completely different expectation. Like I said, the two of them were very strange, and they were both really interested in mushrooms of all kinds. Not psychedelic mushrooms, just they liked mushrooms in general. They had a sort of amateur anthropological theory that because some cultures avoided and feared mushrooms and other cultures thought they were delicious and tasty treats, that had to mean that at some point all humans must have worshipped a mushroom god. Now, if that doesn't really make sense, let me try to explain. It's because the theory is what's technically referred to as very bad. But these two rich weirdos cashing CIA checks thought they had it all figured out. So, when the Wassons took these drugs, they, of course, had the experience of confirming their strange little theory that humans must have worshipped a mushroom god long ago. R. Gordon Wasson wrote,
"In man's evolutionary past, there must have come a moment when he discovered the secret of hallucinatory mushrooms. One is emboldened to the point of asking whether they may not have planted in primitive man the very idea of God."
You won't be pleased to know that although the two promised Maria her privacy, they published both her photo and her location, causing the world to beat a path to her tiny village. The Mexican police became concerned that Maria was dealing drugs, her village began to resent her, one thing led to another, Maria's house was burned down, she said that she wished she'd never shown the Wassons the mushroom ceremony, which is very understandable. Jeez. You can't trust the CIA asset JP Morgan VP and his wife. Who can you trust? So, if these drugs are always different, what is the experience actually like? Unfortunately, I can't tell you anything about the effects of these substances because, as I mentioned, I've never done them. Every time I've been offered, I just said, no, I mustn't. I want to have a YouTube channel one day and talking about doing drugs could make me lose monetization. Please subscribe to my Patreon. But to explain to you the psychoactive effects of these substances, I've created a wacky character who can tell you all about them. Come on in. Hey, yeah, this is the wacky character I was talking about. All right, what's your name? I'm Chill Goblin. No. I'm Chill Goblin. The whole point of this is that you talk about it so that I don't incriminate myself. You can't be named Chill Goblin. You gotta think of something else. And can you maybe do a wacky voice or something that's more in line with our values here? Oh, okay. How's this? Hey everybody, I'm a zany fictional character named Chill Goblin if he did illegal drugs and committed crimes and whose views do not represent the views of the channel. Is that good? Yeah, sure, I guess. Go for it. Perfect. Also, he has glasses. So, yeah, in my experience, it's very difficult to tell what effects are from the drug and what effects are from my expectations. I used to think mushrooms and acid were basically the same, but then someone told me that with acid, you control the trip, whereas with mushrooms, the trip controls you. Now, when I do them now, it seems like that's true, but is it? I don't know. Also, does lemon tech actually work? I don't think there are any real studies about it, but it sure seems to make the mushrooms more potent. I don't know. I'd love to know. I also saw the same kind of guys Terence McKenna talked about seeing on DMT, the exact same kind of guys, elves with eggs. But did I just see them because I heard him talk about them beforehand, or are they really there? I'll be honest, it seems like they were really there. I want to say they are aliens and they are real and they were the same ones Terence McKenna met. I never tried ayahuasca personally, so I can't speak on that one, sorry. But from what I hear, it's probably similar to doing mushrooms, but a lot. Anyway, I want to stress I'm a made-up character, and I was written this way because the real Chill Goblin thought I'd seem more authentic if I didn't know anything about ayahuasca from personal experience. It sort of makes me jump off the page, I think I seem more fleshed out as a character this way, more lived in, I feel real, you know what I mean? All right, that's enough. You're useless. Get out of here. Oh, God, that guy is a bad influence, Goblin Gang. Stay clear. Make sure you don't end up like him. Another early proponent of psychedelics is, of course, Timothy Leary. He's a controversial figure in the psychedelic space, but one thing that shouldn't be up for debate is how interesting his life was. After finishing his PhD, Leary taught psychology as one of the youngest ever tenured professors at Harvard, who lost his job in 1962 for engaging in ethically dubious psychological experiments, also known as just constantly tripping balls on mushrooms and acid with his students. The scandal surrounding his firing brought awareness of these substances to many in the public for the first time. From there, he became a huge figure in 60s counterculture, embracing the hippie movement's aesthetics and never passing up a chance to be interviewed. Over the 60s and 70s, he got married 3 times, arrested 36 times, and just did so many drugs. He ran for governor of California against Ronald Reagan, and John Lennon wrote him a little campaign ditty, which turned out to be Come Together, which is the best Beatles song. At one point, Leary was sentenced to 20 years in prison and given psychological tests upon entry. But in his previous life as a renowned psychologist, Leary had actually designed some of these tests himself and purposely answered the questions in a way so as to be put in a minimum security area from which he promptly escaped. Leary fled to Algeria to live with fellow U.S. fugitive Eldridge Cleaver, Black Panther in exile and inventor of the Cleavers, a fashion statement that unfortunately never really took off, who ended up, you know what, just honestly, scan the guy's Wikipedia page. Almost every paragraph could be its own Dan Brown tier professor adventure novel. Not a great work of literature or anything, but like a decent airport bookshop thriller. Anyway, Leary seems like he was probably kind of an asshole sometimes, but he contributed some very important ideas to psychedelic culture. The confusing but famous phrase,
"Turn on, tune in, and drop out,"
was his, as was,
"In order to think for yourself, you must question authority, man."
Dude also had some genuinely great one-liners, like the time he said,
"Psychedelic drugs can cause panic and temporary insanity in people who have not taken them."
Damn, banger tweet, bro. But if you ask me, Leary's most useful contribution to the culture was the popularization of the concept known as set and setting. Here's a quote from Leary's The Psychedelic Experience.
The drug dose does not produce the transcendent experience. It merely acts as a chemical key. It opens the mind, frees the nervous system of its ordinary patterns and structures. The nature of the experience depends almost entirely on the set and setting. Set denotes the preparation of the individual, including his personality structure and his mood at the time. Setting is physical, the weather, the room's atmosphere, social, feelings of persons present towards one another, and cultural, prevailing views as to what is real.
This concept is really important. These two categories, set and setting, are going to massively impact how a trip affects a person. Someone is bound to have an entirely different experience taking the same amount of LSD moments after being dumped than they would the night they won a prestigious award. Likewise, the quality of the trip will change based on whether it takes place at a peaceful, isolated cottage surrounded by your best friends or a cold bus station with some strangers you just met. Let's take things back to the psychedelic 60s again. Now, conservative-minded people as a whole would have been less likely to partake in drug use at this time because it goes against their values of never having fun. Use of these drugs were largely associated with those in the hippie movement, or maybe those willing to participate in an indigenous mushroom ritual, or anyone who got an invitation to a party at Timothy Leary's drug party mansion. I mean, 64-room scientific experiment laboratory. Now, if you were in a position to take these drugs at the time, you're most likely already anti-war, pro-peace and love, and surrounded by other people with the same views. Taking these chemicals in this setting with this mindset was likely to lead to epiphanies about ending the war, building egalitarian communes, maybe even voting for Timothy Leary over Ronald Reagan. There was a popular idea that if only the leaders of the world could turn on, they'd come to the same conclusions. But correlation doesn't necessarily mean causation. Let's look at some psychedelic testimonials from a few internet Nazis. Try to focus on how their expectations, previously held beliefs, and their surroundings, in other words, their set and setting, might have affected the kinds of trips and realizations they had. Content warning here for pretty extreme anti-Semitism and racism. Skip to this time code to jump past these Nazi quotes. Now, here's a few posts from a user on a neo-Nazi Discord leaked by Unicorn Riot explaining how he got Nazi-pilled. I grew up with my dad watching Hitler speeches and World War II documentaries almost every day since I was a kid. I used to watch Hitler videos and speeches while on LSD tabs. Then I started really researching, and then I just went from brainwashed to just a fucking 9,288,E839911488D chess player against the Jews. Watching a Hitler speech on acid is a rookie mistake. That guy really does not have mellow vibes. It's very easy to find Nazis on Stormfront, the largest white supremacist site on the internet, discussing their experiences with drugs. Here's a couple quotes from Stormfront psychonauts guaranteed to ruin your day. I ate acid and watched TV one day when I was about 20, one of the major turning points in my life. That was the day I realized everything I'd been watching on TV my whole life was mind control programming produced by Jews that hate whites. Psychedelics turned me into a white nationalist. Do you think it's possible that someone who never had held anti-Semitic views before would drop acid and have a revelation about TV like that? It really seems like you'd have to have believed that at least a little bit before psychedelics were introduced. Thinking outside the box is and always will be anti-Semitic. Many computer code writers use microdoses of LSD for creativity, but it also leads to random thoughts like, what if Hitler was right? If you're on a tiny subperceptual microdose of acid for coding, you find yourself entertaining the idea that Hitler was right, roll up your sleeve real quick because you've probably already got a swastika tattoo. So obviously, these guys are ignorant racist pieces of shit. But isn't it interesting how similar their psychedelic anecdotes sound to the peace-loving hippies who thought LSD could save the world? just from the other side of the spectrum. When a Nazi takes LSD, they're gonna have a Nazi LSD trip. They might have earth-shattering epiphanies about how great white people are, or envision their anti-Semitic cartoons coming to life, or feel a deep sense of certainty about how attractive their sister is. You know, Nazi stuff. But because of how profound these revelations seem to them, they might assume the experience will be identical for someone who didn't already have these ideas. You can't expect everyone to have the same trip just because they take the same substance, because the substance is only a part of it. You also need the same set and setting. Yeah, maybe if everyone had the same trip as you, the world would be a better place, but that's kind of like saying we could solve everything if everyone had your exact brain, life experiences, relationships, and current environment. How many lives could we save if we could just get everyone in Israel and Palestine to get turned down by Stacey Washington at the bus stop in grade 7? We'll never know. But I think about you all the time, Stacey. So here's the thing. I don't believe that psychedelics are at all contradictory to right-wing or even fascist beliefs. But what I haven't brought up yet is that there is actually some scientific evidence that I'm wrong about that. According to a couple of recent studies, psychedelic use is associated with more liberal values, more connectedness to nature, and more openness, while being negatively correlated to authoritarian personalities. Oh boy, things are looking quite bad for the thesis of my video essay. We better address these studies and see if there's any substance to them. Psychedelics make you more liberal and less authoritarian. So, as far as I can tell, the evidence for this really just comes from one study from 2017 called Psychedelics, Personality, and Political Perspectives, a survey of 893 drug users. People with a history of using the classical psychedelics were compared to a control group of people who do normal drugs like alcohol or cocaine. There was another study in 2018 with similar results, but they only surveyed 14 people. Well, turns out I actually conducted my own survey of one person, myself, and my conclusion was I get to ignore that second survey. 14 people? I surveyed more people than that before breakfast. What can I say? I like to ask questions. Anyway, this survey asked participants to list the drugs they have done, and also asked them questions about politics, arranging them along a left-right political axis as well as a authoritarian liberal axis. From the study,
we found a significant association between psychedelic use and both liberal, or left-leaning, and libertarian, or anti-authoritarian, values. Liberal, or left-leaning, individuals place emphasis on social justice and equality and are wary of unregulated capitalistic practices. Psychedelic use in the 1960s and 1970s was strongly associated with anti-establishment and egalitarian counterculture movements.
Oof, seems like my whole video has been debunked by facts and logic. Or has it? Well, as pointed out by Brian A. Pace and Neşe Devenot in their article Right-Wing Psychedelia, we should expect the inclusion of drugs like ayahuasca and mescaline by Nour et al. To skew these results, as the people who partake in these substances usually must do so in an indigenous context, deep in the jungle. The odds that a white supremacist authoritarian would put themselves in such a situation seems intuitively less likely than the same xenophobic authoritarian indulging in cocaine or alcohol. I also guess that because these drugs are illegal, your run-of-the-mill, rules-obsessed authoritarian probably prefer to get fucked up on a legal regulated drug like alcohol. Right? I mean, all the study shows is that liberals are more likely to do psychedelics, not that psychedelics make you liberal. I bet the average hacky sack player would score pretty similarly to the psychedelic users in the study. Does hacking the sack around make you liberal? The answer is no, although I'm pretty sure devil sticks do make you libertarian. Connection to the environment. This one was covered in that same study, but this time there have been a ton of other studies that showed the same correlation between taking psychedelics and something called nature relatedness. I don't know, you think there's anything to that? Oh yeah, it's for sure true. Best place to take psychs is outside, get into the woods, touch a tree, look up at the night sky, really see nature for the first time in your life and just realize how beautiful it is and how you're a part of it. Like, there's no human versus nature. Humans are nature. We just sometimes get so caught up in our silly little egos that we forget that. Are you high right now? Fictionally, yes I am. It's me, Fictional Goblin. Remember folks, the Chill Goblin YouTube channel is not responsible for and does not endorse my views and actions. Great catchphrase, Fictional Goblin. Now get out of here. Now, the terms right and left are definitely useful for quickly describing political concepts or for directing a taxi. But the terms are also completely inadequate for describing a few real-world situations. For example, there's nothing inherently left-wing about believing in vaccines. Only context and history and cultural divides make it seem like there is. Similarly, there's nothing inherently left-wing about environmentalism, strange as that may seem. Is it hard to imagine tree-hugging New Age, back-to-the-land hippie types becoming Nazis? It really shouldn't be. Maybe you've noticed all the natural healing, organic lifestyle, yoga mommy Instagram accounts that a few months into the pandemic made a hard pivot into Hillary Clinton as a pedophile type content. But even historically, hippies can be compared to the countercultural Wandervogel movement in Germany in the early 20th century, which embraced a sort of romantic natural mysticism. Some of their iconic cultural texts, like Hermann Hesse's Siddhartha from 1922, would even become popular later on with American hippies in the 60s and 70s. As time went on, the Wandervogel movement was absorbed and assimilated into other German youth movements, but traces of it survived all the way to the Hitler Youth. Now, these studies talk about nature-relatedness, a supposedly left-wing value, which is defined as being the feeling that one is not separate from nature, but a part of it. Have you ever heard Nazis chanting blood and soil? This phrase connects the person and their racial identity to the land they are on. I'm sorry, I don't think nature-relatedness is much of a jump for Nazis, who were actually huge environmentalists anyways. This is related to another concept the Nazis had called the Volk, which held a similar place in their ideology as the proletariat have in Marxism. The Volk are the idealized revolutionary subjects, the farmers, who the Nazis believed had a special connection to the land. Ecofascism isn't just in the past, it's also on the horizon, and in many ways, it's already here. Listen to Tucker Carlson talk about the coming climate refugees, or Bill Gates voice his concerns about overpopulation in Africa. Read up about the white supremacist behind the 2019 El Paso shooting, an eco-fascist who named his manifesto An Inconvenient Truth, like the Al Gore climate change documentary. You're looking at the future of the right. As time goes by and climate catastrophe becomes harder and harder to dismiss and deny, we're going to look back and miss the days when conservatives simply didn't believe in global warming.
Ego death.
Ego death, the dissolution of the self, the destruction of duality, a concept with parallels in many world religions. The Fourfold Noble Truths of Buddhism advocate the elimination of desire to eliminate suffering. Rastafarians say I and I instead of we. Even the Golden Rule, a concept found in essentially every religion that exists, can be connected to this concept. Treat others as you would like others to treat you, because those others, in many ways, are you. I'll admit, though I never really bought most of the stuff about psychedelics bringing people to the left, for a while I genuinely believed that experiencing ego death could only make people more empathetic and loving to one another. Ego death is among the most intense effects these drugs can have on the human mind and is associated with what is referred to in psychedelics as a mystical experience. Ego death is actually possible to achieve without drugs through cheaper processes like deep meditation, heat exhaustion, starvation, or almost dying for real. Scientifically, the ego, that sense of self it's difficult to imagine going without, is associated with a bit of brain chemistry known as the default mode network, which does appear to shut down when someone experiences ego death. So, what's ego death like, Fictional Goblin? It's pretty cool, actually. Basically, you're tripping out and things start falling away. Your connection to your body, your visuals, even the words that you could use to describe the experience just fall away from you. The space between things closes, fills up, and there's nothing left to divide anything from anything else. You don't exist anymore, but you still have awareness. It's just that you're connected to everything, like a universal hum. Well, that sounds terrifying and not fun at all. I don't want to do that. Sure, but you know who's saying that, though, is your ego. Your ego doesn't want to give up control. It never has. It's like a weird little guy in your head that tells you who you are and what you want all the time. But once you murder that little guy, it's actually really wonderful. The downside is that the ego eventually comes back. I don't know, are there any long-term negative side effects? Yeah. Once it happens to you, it's really hard to shut the fuck up about it. It sort of feels like becoming God in a way. All right, I get it. That's enough, fictional Goblin. Get out of here. Jeez. That guy's a terrible role model. So the ego death experience is sort of idealized in psychedelic culture. In LSD or psilocybin therapy, it's basically the aim of the session. Kill the ego so you can really objectively examine why you have to quit smoking or whatever. The experience of ego death is also heavily associated with becoming a better person, particularly through heightening empathy. Once you've felt that connectedness with everyone else in the world, how could you want to hurt any of them? Once you've realized existence doesn't end when you have no self, how could you continue to live your life in a self-centered way? Well, actor Cary Grant did a ton of LSD therapy and evangelized about all the good it did for him in a 1959 interview. Listen to this quote and tell me if you think the man still has a bit of an ego.
All the sadness and vanities was torn away. I was pleased with the hardcore strength I found inside of me. I think I've always been a pretty fair actor. Now I know I'm gonna be the best actor there is. I had my ego stripped away. A man is a better actor without ego, 'cause he has truth in him. You know, it's amazing, but young women have never been so attracted to me, if you know what I mean. Hey! I'm Cary Grant over here.
Ah, yes, it's just like the Buddha said. Life is suffering. Suffering comes from desire. Eliminate desire. You become the best actor of all time, and a bunch of barely legal hotties are going to fall all over you. I'd like to apologize to this necklace for that joke. I'm very unconvinced that an ego death necessarily makes someone a better person, because that ego always comes back. And a lot of times it seems pretty damn pleased with itself, having experienced death and resurrection. You know, like a messiah. But even all that aside, it's very possible for a virulent white supremacist to have one of these experiences, become one with all people, and not change anything about their racial beliefs. If you're not a fascist, this probably seems illogical and inconsistent, but it makes perfect sense from their perspective. This excerpt from Right-Wing Psychedelia made things click for me. For the fascist, fixation about internal enemies is cast in terms of sickness and disease in an organic politic where the nation, its peoples, and borders are conceptualized as a living body, such as in the 1940 Nazi film Der ewige Jude, The Eternal Jew, where Jews are compared to parasites and rats. Weakness is openly disdained by Nazis and fascists, as reflected in the embrace of social Darwinism and eugenics in both past and present day. Empathy is affected when problems and people are framed as pathogens, where empathy for an outgroup is seen as analogous to skipping radiation treatment out of empathy for cancer cells. So a Nazi who's tripping on a high dose of psychedelics might feel a genuine connection to the people of the world, including the types of groups that they hate, and even be filled with a genuine selfless love for that connected whole. But because they don't recognize the humanity of these groups, it would be logically consistent, even while in this empathetic, ego-free, altered state, for the Nazi to continue to wish for the genocide of these groups, since they would see it as good for the whole. Another content warning for severe anti-Semitism here. Skip to this point to avoid. I've got one more quote from a Nazi on Stormfront to share with you. I went ahead and removed the worst parts, but spirit is still there. As you listen, try to imagine what kind of takeaways this person might have if they experienced a mystical psychedelic ego death. I have had experience with psychedelics in the past. When used the right way, when taken in the right place, in the right state of mind, these things can be highly beneficial in a number of ways for the individual. Of course, none of this will be made readily available to the body of the people by the Israeli Zionist-occupied government. They want us sick and on synthetic meds. I feel that if Hitler had more time, he would have been publicly coming to the same conclusions about psychedelics. I can say in my experiences, the usage of natural psychedelics from my teenage years helped me to become a very smart and caring adult. I don't think I would have been such a caring individual without some of these experiences. In short, they made me a better person, magic mushrooms in particular. Yeah, that one's rough. Just picture me digging through neo-Nazi forums, finding messed up posts to put in this video for you guys, like a cat about to drop half a dead rat in your bed. Look what I brought you! I really don't like hearing Nazis pat themselves on the back for their humanity and talking about Hitler like if he were alive today, he'd be on Duncan Trussell's podcast. Nazis really don't deserve magic mushrooms, and it's upsetting that this one got so much out of the experience. What I find most disturbing about this is that in this dipshit's twisted Third Reich logic, mass genocide becomes an act of love for the world. He actually uses the capitalized phrase, the body of the people, to represent the collective white masses being denied magic mushrooms by powerful Zionist forces. In this way, a fascist racism can be made ego-death proof. Why this matters? Alright, so unfortunately, psychedelics don't belong to the left. Would be cool if they did. Whoa, I'm tripping so hard on communist acid. It's like my body's made of thousands of tiny hands and they're all seizing the means of production. Whoa. These drugs are at best a neutral tool, like a hammer. This tool can be used to do useful, cool things like constructing a bookshelf. In the wrong hands, however, a hammer could just as easily be put to hateful, violent use, like constructing a bookshelf that only holds J.K. Rowling books. But why does it matter? Well, there are a couple reasons. For one, psychedelics' reputation as a part of left-wing counterculture can give effective cover to people spreading right-wing ideology, as long as they pay lip service to how much they love mushrooms or whatever. I'm guessing this association is also useful for them since they get to seem cool and chill, but they don't have to actually support general drug use. Psychedelics are not like other drugs in a few key ways that actually exempt them from some common conservative anti-drug talking points. They're not addictive. Using them is supposedly productive. You're not just having degenerate fun, you're doing a type of therapy, or you're microdosing and being better at your job. It's a way to support drugs without supporting people who do drugs just for pleasure. Jordan Peterson, a man obsessed with hierarchy, a professor who rose to international fame and success based on his ability to drum up uninformed but passionate transphobia around a Canadian law he didn't fully understand. This guy loves psychedelics. He's also very aware of how they can be used to launder certain platforms. On a 4-hour Joe Rogan podcast, dressed like a haunted ventriloquist dummy, Jordan ridiculed those who considered Joe Rogan a part of the right.
And it's not just because you know what the double helix pattern of DNA is, because you can also see souls. You can also see the very
You're talking
components.
Just like the conservative that everyone thinks you are.
Yeah.
And apparently this picture from Rogan's studio of Joe Rogan as a monkey covered in mushrooms is supposed to be at odds with the idea that he could ever be a gateway to the alt-right. And just as an aside here, but I really like psychedelic art, and I find this picture disgusting. Like, I wouldn't be able to eat with that thing hanging up on the wall. This looks like a scary Canada health warning label on a pack of monkey-flavored cigarettes. Anyway, you can see what Peterson is doing here, right? Because Joe Rogan's show absolutely is a gateway to the alt-right, and it has been for years. His open embrace of psychedelics doesn't do anything to scare away the steady parade of conservatives, IDW members, crypto-fascists, and regular fascists that use his podcast as a turbo boost for their career. In fact, it gives them cover. And if there's one thing fascists are good at, it's appropriating superficially leftist imagery to appeal to a broader audience without actually changing their anti-democratic beliefs. Now let me introduce you to a guy named Rick Doblin, the founder and executive director of MAPS, the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies. MAPS is a hugely prominent organization in the area of psychedelic research, raising awareness of these substances and lobbying group towards legalizing these substances for therapeutic use. Michael Pollan describes Doblin like this.
Doblin, born in 1953, is a great shaggy dog with a bone. He has... What does that mean? What? He has been lobbying to change the government's mind about psychedelics since shortly after graduating from New College in Florida in 1987. Like Timothy Leary, Doblin is the happiest of warriors, never not smiling and exhibiting a degree of enthusiasm for the work you wouldn't expect from a man who's been knocking his head against the same wall for his entire adult life.
Here's Rick Doblin talking about psychedelics at a TED Talk.
But most importantly, psychedelics gave me this feeling of our shared humanity, of our unity with all life. And I felt that these experiences had the potential to help be an antidote to tribalism, to fundamentalism, to genocide, and environmental destruction.
Goblin definitely talks a big game, a little bit idealistic, but from the clip there, it sort of sounds like he's got some leftist leanings, right? According to How to Change Your Mind, early in his career, Rick actually mailed MDMA pills out to a group of people he considered to be the world's spiritual leaders. Wow, I mean, a lot of people said the best way to achieve world peace was if the people in charge just took psychedelics, but how many of us actually came through with the supply? But I'm afraid I've got a bit of a bone to pick with Doblin. First of all, despite talking about how psychedelics are going to solve tribalism and buy everybody the box set of Lost, Doblin and MAPS are not in favor of decriminalizing psychedelics. They want it to be legal in therapeutic settings and strictly controlled outside of that. In my view, this kind of policy on psychedelics is unacceptable, primarily because it does nothing to stop the expensive and racist drug war. It just creates one small professional class that's allowed to distribute these drugs to their wealthy clients. I know I'm coming on strong here, but any activist in the drug sphere who isn't pushing for full decriminalization, the expunging of all drug-related criminal records, it's not on the right team. It would be one thing to argue about whether psychedelics should be available over the counter or by prescription, but it's another to think that just the act of having any in your possession should be grounds to lock someone up. The war on drugs is obviously a harmful and pointless waste of time and resources. And at this point, we have models to point to that prove decriminalization reduces harm. Somehow I doubt that the only problem with psychedelics is that we haven't tried integrating them into the nightmare that is the American healthcare system. Furthermore, I find it frankly disgusting that there could be anyone at MAPS not in favor of full decriminalization when their current passion and interest in psychedelic research almost certainly means that they were guilty of procuring these drugs illegally in the past themselves. Guys, what the heck? Also, I'll be honest, I'm just not a big fan of psychedelic therapy. I'm sorry. The industry is rife with all kinds of abuse. The therapist or therapists have total control over their patients, many of whom may have no experience with psychedelics before they plunge into the depths of their consciousness with these sessions. Check out the podcast Power Trip for some horrifying stories about this. And also, hey, maybe I'm a little bit old-fashioned, but I think your first time doing psychedelics should be spent wandering through the woods laughing your ass off with your silly friends, not sitting in a therapist's office murdering your ego to examine your trauma as closely as possible. And what hurts the most, what really hurts, Doblin got to our sweet innocent boy Prince Michael Pollan. Pollan, the newly crowned global expert in psychedelics, is out here writing multiple articles for the New York Times talking about we gotta make sure psychedelics stay in the hands of therapists and away from recreational users. Look how they massacred my boy. So, I'm a little bit upset about this, but my beef with Doblin doesn't even end there, while telling anyone who will listen that psychedelics are going to cure intolerance and save the world. Doblin and MAPS are making a direct, coordinated effort to make psychedelics appealing to conservatives. MAPS has done this by concentrating on MDMA psychedelic therapy for police officers and soldiers who are dealing with PTSD. MAPS has received at least $1 million from Rebecca Mercer, the founder of Parler, one of the Trump campaign's largest donors, and a part owner of Breitbart, where she oversaw Steve Bannon publishing a report advocating psychedelic therapy for soldiers. Doblin once said that Republicans need psychedelics more than anyone else, and with that in mind, MAPS has met with a huge number of Republican politicians and assorted right-wing figures, including President Donald Trump, Mike Pence, Rudy Giuliani, Alex Jones, Matt Gaetz, Rand Paul, and countless other ghouls. All the while, MAPS cloaks itself in the aesthetics of counterculture. MAPS. It's psychedelics, but for cops. Turn on, tune in, drop your weapon, and put your hands above your head. We have you surrounded. Stop resisting. At some point. We really have to accept the idea that psychedelics aren't just for the left anymore, and honestly, they never were.
You're basically politically a conservative, and I think it's kind of, there's like this dichotomy between, wait a minute, he's a conservative, but also he's the magic mushroom guy. I sort of say that's what the new sort of conservative thing is.
I have to say, my brain is still in recovery mode after taking in the fact that Dave Rubin just made an astute observation about politics that I agree with. Psychedelics certainly take us to some truly bizarre places. But there's still hope that the left might be able to get weird in time. As these drugs become more recognized, I'd really hate to let Joe Rogan and the worst people on earth be the ones to claim them. Symposia is a great online leftist psychedelic journal that I got a lot of research for this video from. I really like a lot of Mark Fisher stuff on acid communism. Check out this video from One Dime for a great primer on that. I'm definitely not going to say you should try these drugs yourself on my YouTube channel, but whether you do psychedelics or not, I find Bill Richards' flight instructions from the 60s are super useful for getting in the right headspace, just in life, not for doing anything in particular. Am I safe with saying that? I hope so. Whether you engage in psychedelic drugs or not, I will still respect you. Just remember, these are politically neutral chemicals that do not belong to one side of the ideological spectrum. Obviously, chemicals don't have beliefs. Brains do. And please, don't believe every grand theory you hear about these substances from the people who do them a lot, no matter how confidently they're stated. Except the idea that every religion has been influenced by psychedelics. That one's true, 100%. Hindu gods, Buddhist philosophy, Islamic art. Look at these Iranian mosques. Aren't they incredible? Even boring old Christianity has these sublime, beautiful, kaleidoscopic, symmetrical churches that feel like a 3D DMT trip to walk through. You want to talk about the Torah? Do yourself a favor and reread Ezekiel 1 and 10. It reads less like a VeggieTales episode and more like a Trip Report subreddit post. Come on now. Seriously. Like, I'm 100% on this. Like, every religion, dude. Like what do you think a burning bush is, huh? You think there's like a bush that's on fire? Like, I wouldn't even like write that down. That was something, like, they were like inhaling the fumes, you know? Like, that was like, they gotta have been doing that. That's like, it's 100%. It's 100%. It's 100%. It's like 85%.